So I want to thank you all for joining this mini showcase this afternoon. It means a lot that you would each take 30 minutes to learn more about the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy next. So our team here today is Martine Miller, our president, Rebecca Cataldi, Senior Director of Programs, Lujane Kiki, Program Manager for the Middle East and Africa, Ray Kim, PhD, Director of U.S. Programs and Partnerships, Olga Batkin, our Financial Administrator, Hannah Shiflett, our Strategic Communications Fellow, Frank Roby, our Chairman, Dr. Douglas Johnston, our founder and vice chair, various board members, and myself, Rod McAllister, a very proud CEO. Next. So a bit of background on ICRD. We were founded in 1998 by Dr. Johnston. You can read our mission and vision on the screen here. Basically, we become connective tissue between two arenas of diplomacy and religion that rarely intersect, let alone work together. And what we're striving for daily is a world where our children's generation and beyond experience far rarer violent conflict and where it ends more quickly and the peace sustains, mainly because religion and diplomacy have learned how to make common cause together. It's a 15 to 25-year goal that really motivates us. We do this in a variety of ways. We prevent and resolve violent conflict by specifically preventing and countering violent extremism. We depolarize, de-radicalize, drive out hate speech and militant narratives. We mediate between conflicting parties. We deconflict aid delivery channels and much else, all working principally through local faith leader partners on the ground, including women peacemakers, tribal, and youth leaders. Next. So our program is going to be as follows. Ray Kim will kick us off by talking about what we're up to here in the U.S., primarily by concentrating on faith, ethics, and the militarization of AI, but also touching lightly on what we're doing with faith community engagement. Then Rebecca Cataldi will follow with what we're doing in Yemen, Lujane Kiki then on Syria, and Martine Miller will conclude on Ukraine. Then our chairman, Frank Roby, will sum it all up with a word on why this work matters. That should bring us to the half hour, but the rest of us will stay on the line for any interaction that any of you want with us, any questions. You're welcome to remain as long as you like. So thank you again for your attention, and over to you, Ray.
Thanks, Rod. Hello, everybody. This is Ray Kim, coming to you from Dulles International Airport, actually. So I'm on my way on. I'll about to hit the road soon. Um, I'm going to walk us through two of our program tracks in the U.S. domestic portfolio, and the first one is going to be about the militarization of AI. And some of you may be wondering, why would an international peace building organization that works primarily at the intersection of religion and diplomacy care at all about this issue? And that's because, well, one, first and foremost, war is already being increasingly shaped by technology that promises killing efficiency and speed and precision. Um, but not only that, we do believe that with increased development of these kinds of technologies and deployment of these technologies, we will be more incentivized to use them, which then creates higher frequencies of violent conflict around the world. This is not some down the road kind of dystopic future. It is a present reality. A lot of this technology, such as dynamic targeting systems, are being used right now. And the world, such as the war in Ukraine, various fronts in Southeast Asia, as well as Israel and Gaza. Our current political atmosphere of heightened tension and conflict actually incentivizes nation states to treat technological superiority as the ultimate good because no one wants to get left behind in this AI arms race. Now, AI may make war appear cleaner, easier, and less humanly costly to those far from the battlefield, such as ourselves, but the actual burden of suffering remains brutally human and makes opaque some of the moral consequences of using lethal autonomous weapon systems. There is great serious human cost to this that is getting overlooked by many of the policy frameworks that currently exist, and no fault of their own. However, our stance as ICRD is that even though the militarization of AI is ethically approved, it is still nonetheless morally risky. And that is why an AI-enabled warfare requires faith-informed moral engagement within existing US defense frameworks. And just as faith leaders played a critical role in articulating the moral hazards of nuclear deterrence long before arms control regimes fully matured, we believe that ICRD can help reintroduce restraint, conscience, and human dignity into conversations about AI-enabled warfare as well. Next, please. Our approach would be based on our strengths. And our strength is not in declaring what should be banned or offering technical prescriptions, but in naming the moral costs that existing policy frameworks are not designed to see. We are also very well suited to create space for moral reflection among those, quote unquote, inside the system, those who are working under conditions of constrained moral agency, whether because they are part of the military institutions, whether they are defense contractors, or whether they are working for the tech companies developing these things. Um, and we think we are very well suited because our work is fundamentally based on discretion and trust. And so we have played the role of good faith conveners multiple times in warring parties, but also we've earned the trust of, let's say, for example, the Ministry of Education in Saudi Arabia, that they invited us in to help revise and reform their curriculum, a task that required much sensibility and sensitivity. Next, please. Some areas for immediate engagement for us would be building on the kind of decades of relationship and trust building that has positioned us to be these good faith conveners for various key stakeholder groups, both internal and external to the US military. And I'm thinking right off the top of my head, US military chaplains. They are on the front lines, figuratively and literally, dealing with these issues and creating the space needed for them to have honest moral and strategic reflections on what military might and leadership means for the US on the global stage. And we see this playing out in three steps. The first round of dialogues or conversations will be intra-group, meaning those within the stakeholder groups talking amongst themselves before they meet anybody else from a different stakeholder group. And these structured conversations around escalation risk, moral injury, and the ethical boundaries of autonomous systems will actually prepare them to have these curated intergroup dialogues in round two. And this will be to generating to cross-sector engagement so that we are getting military chaplains talking to tech developers, talking to defense contractors, et cetera. And lastly, we hope that all of this cross-sector engagement will eventually yield some kind of fruit that is external and public facing and tools that will actually help us shape the broader public discourse as well as imagination around lethal autonomous weapon systems. And with that, we're going to pivot a little bit into our broader religious community engagement stuff in the US. And so for the most part, we think that this is important because religion is not receding from the public sphere as many assumed it would decades ago. There was a big, hoo-ha around the secularization hypothesis, and it is proven, quite frankly, wrong. Religion is not going anywhere, and in fact, one might argue it is only increasing invisibility in our public spaces. However, this has raised a very important question for many, especially in our country. How should our religious values and convictions guide our participation in civic democracy? And our concern is that if we do not deliberate on such questions as a public, as faith communities, then unfortunately, illiberal and undemocratic visions of society tend to gain traction because those are the most clear-cut, black and white answers to this question that is quite complex. And so our contention is that healthy, well-integrated, and civically active faith communities can serve as one of the best bulwarks of democracy. Next, please. Our approach would essentially start by encouraging faith communities to become spaces for discernment and collective deliberation amongst themselves, not spaces that reinforce partisan division. And this is very much tied to our larger work around depolarization and preventing political violence in general. Then we would be taking lessons from 3 years of on the ground community level work with over 50 churches and over 200 trained faith leaders from across the Portland, Oregon area. And taking lessons that we've learned through that experience and applying it in a way where we will continue to develop and test what Christian civic participation can look like in practice in various other locations across the country. And some potential viable locations are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the upper Midwest around Minneapolis and Fargo, North Dakota, but also the DMV. That's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Lastly, we'll be guiding faith communities towards a healthier path of political engagement that doesn't turn politics into a battle for control, which inevitably kind of happens when that all-important question of how do our faith convictions and our values guide our civic participation is left unanswered. Then maybe it's human nature, but we've seen time and time again where the go-to answer to that question is seize power and then enforce your values on a society that you want to shape. And we want to stay away from that as much as possible. And in order to do that, we need to get hands-on with our faith communities. So with that, I pass the baton off to Rebecca.
Thanks, Ray. Hi, I'm Rebecca Cataldi, our Senior Director of Programs. And you've probably been hearing more about Yemen in the news recently because of the Houthi group, which is a rebel group designated by the US government as a terrorist group that took over much of Yemen's territory and is currently fighting the Yemeni government to take more. The Houthis are also a key ally of Iran, and in the current conflict pose not only a military threat, but also a threat to global trade and shipping through the Red Sea. Yemen is also home to one of al-Qaeda's most dangerous branches, and one which not only carries out ongoing attacks in Yemen, which are expanding, unfortunately, but has also focused attacks externally against the US and other countries. And these type of militant groups gain strength in Yemen because they exploit the critical needs of vulnerable people for things like economic livelihoods, services, legal justice, even psychological needs for purpose and belonging. And they lure recruits with money and services and promised opportunities. Next slide, please. ICRD has been working in Yemen since 2012, which is when I first personally traveled there and started to build relationships and trust with local religious, tribal, and community leaders. And with these partners, ICRD pioneered one of the first programs in Yemen to counter the influence and reduce recruitment into terrorist and militia groups, working with local leaders to provide alternative paths for meeting the same needs that people were turning to these groups to meet. And as one example, in one region that was a previous al-Qaeda recruiting area, we worked with local partners to resolve a conflict over water access by building a water pipeline in the village. And because of our relationships of trust, we also learned from the village elders that they were facing another challenge, which was that a number of their youth had gone and joined al-Qaeda and were fighting, and now a lot of them wanted to quit and come back to the village. And the elders were a bit worried about what to do with them when they came back because they didn't have much education or job skills. They could radicalize other vulnerable youth. And so working together, we decided to engage the former fighters and other vulnerable youth in building the water pipeline. And through this, they not only learned valuable job skills, but they also gained a pride in doing something heroic to help their community through providing life-giving water rather than fighting. And as part of the program, these youth also received training in peace leadership skills, things like mediation. And after the project, when we assessed the impact, we found that not only had the water conflict been resolved and kids who had to drop out of school to fetch water were able to return, but the youth had also started going out on their own to mediate conflicts in the community and even started their own community association to promote youth involvement in development. And this was because they had not just learned new skills, but they had assumed a new identity as peace leaders rather than fighters. And this was an identity they were proud of and wanted to sustain, even no longer having external funding or prodding. And community leaders told us, many in our village thought that Al-Qaeda was better than our government because when they were here, they were at least giving us services that the government wasn't. But now through this project, we've realized we don't need Al-Qaeda because we were able to solve this problem on our own working together. And so we're never going to let these militants back in our village. And our youth have promised that they won't join any kind of militant group again. Next slide, please. And so subsequently, we expanded this work across Yemen to reach thousands more and provide tangible, credible alternatives to terrorist groups and militias through things like engaging former fighters and vulnerable youth in water and sanitation projects and infrastructure building, livelihood opportunities, vocational training, and community service initiatives. And in one area that had been a recruiting ground for Al-Qaeda, after ICRD's engagement, 80% of responding participants said that they would now be less likely to join or support an armed group. Next slide, please. I'll finish by saying that our local partners in Yemen are asking us to expand this work, but unfortunately, due to lack of funding, we've actually had to suspend many of these programs instead. But through our relationships built over the past decade, we have a unique ability to do this work now, even in areas where most NGOs and even the UN are currently having difficulty operating. And so supporting ICRD will not only allow us to restart and expand this work to help the people of Yemen, but to help everyone affected by the Iran-US war and the Houthis' role in fueling it. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Lujane.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. I'm Lujane Kiki, Program Manager for Middle East and Africa. So while our approach in Yemen is rooted in countering the exploitation of basic needs, our work in Syria addresses a different but equally critical issue, which is the identity vacuum. In Syria, 90% of population lives in poverty. There is a major destruction in institutions and a fractured society. We are not just looking at post-conflict stabilization, we are looking at the society going through an uncertain transition. We've witnessed the collapse of the old state-enforced narrative of resistance. Add to that the prolonged brutal conflict that divided the Syrian people and the distorted social fabric. Because of all of this, people have retreated into survival mode, which we call the us versus them silos. So the issue is not really mainly hunger or providing basic needs. It is the hardening of the sectarian and ethnic and social defensive lines. Next, please. So in this environment, traditional institutional approaches often fail because there is no trust among communities. There is no trust between the communities and the institutions themselves. So here is where ICRD steps in. We operate specifically in that gap. We are in Syria actually to activate existing moral authority of religious and community leaders, because these trusted leaders aren't just influencers, they are the only one able to cross sectarian lines without being seen as a threat. And you can see the map here illustrating ICRD's reach. We're actually not working only in these governorates, but we are working currently on the Dialogues for Syria program in these governorates, but we also have reach all over Syria. Next, please. So before the liberation, ICRD worked in northeastern part of Syria on preventing and countering violent extremism, given the previous existence of ISIS in detention camps. But since the liberation, we've worked on updating our Syria strategy to align with the contextual shifts and new appearing risks and actors in the country. So our updated current strategy focuses on the following 4 pillars. The first is reducing violence through addressing disinformation and hate speech. In Syria, disinformation, unfortunately, is not just a noise, it's actually contributing to escalation of violence. The second pillar is strengthening social cohesion. Our current program, Dialogues for Syria, isn't just one and off meetings. We are building infrastructure that is needed for community leaders to talk. So when tension flares, hopefully not, They should be calling their counterparts in our network and working together to de-escalate, to transform conflicts, and hopefully build positive peace. The third pillar is economic resilience. As Rebecca mentioned before, in Yemen, ICRD works in the intersection of peace building and economic development. So we create spaces where intercommunal cooperation to support economic recovery is required to function. And the final pillar is preventing, again, and countering violent extremism, and we are really focused on youth and vulnerable populations. Next slide, please. And within the broader social cohesion and pluralism pillar, we have a vital specific track that is focusing on the preservation and empowerment of Syrian Christian communities. The first one is empowering Christian leadership to establish a school and serve as neutral mediators. And the second one by revitalizing the Aramaic heritage's educational program to teach Aramaic language to interested from all over the world. So we're hoping that by doing this program, we will be able to bridge differences even in Syria and work on collaboration and cooperation between the different components. Next slide, please. Our methodology, ICRD's methodology, is tested and it is backed by data from interviews, surveys, and dialogues from different stakeholders, local stakeholders on the ground. It is based on strengthening social cohesion and eliminating prejudice through structured cooperative interaction. We move people from talking in virtual dialogue to working on joint projects. For example, when we build a school or a clinic together, you stop seeing the other and you start seeing a partner. Next slide, please. So you might ask yourself why it matters for someone who's living in the United States to care for Syria. And frankly, because of critical reality of geopolitics. Syria remains the central theater where regional adversaries leverage instability to project power. And we've seen this during the Assad era, an expansion of Russia, Iran, Hezbollah into Syria, and also the vacuum causing ISIS to expand in the region. So all of these adversaries thrive in the vacuum of a broken state. Thus, a stable, pluralistic Syria is the ultimate barrier to adversary expansion. By empowering local networks to foster social cohesion, we build the societal immunity required to limit where adversaries can project influence. We've already done the hard work. We have the networks. We have the connections. We're actually working on the ground. Your investment will allow us to move forward with our strategy. Thank you. And to Martin.
Thank you, Lujane, for sharing and for all you do day and night in support of peace in Syria. Good afternoon. My name is Martine Miller, and I serve as president of ICRD. For more than a decade, I've had the honor of working alongside Ukrainian colleagues who have become family to me. I am deeply honored to help carry their voices here today, to share part of their story with you all, and to invite you to stand with them in supporting their courage, leadership, and work for peace that they work on day and night. So for most of us, we have come to understand the war in Ukraine through the media, the shifting front lines, the military strategies, the debates over aid, energy security, food supply, and a broader geopolitical contest shaping Europe and beyond. And that geopolitical dimension matters deeply, including to us here in the United States. It affects global stability, alliances, economic security, and the rules that govern how nations interact. But what is often less visible is how this war is being lived on the ground with our friends and colleagues and those that we think about daily and nightly. For Ukrainians, this is not only about territory or geopolitics. It's about protecting family, community, faith, identity, and the ability to remain a people under extraordinary pressure. As you see the statistics on this screen, they are more than underreported numbers. For instance, 10.8 million people inside Ukraine need humanitarian assistance in 2026. That includes 2.2 million children. They show how the local and global come together. What is being tested in Ukraine is not only military strength or political resolve, it is whether society can hold together and understand and sustain under violence, and whether the world will support the human foundations that makes recovery and peace possible. As one woman faith leader put it in our meeting together in February, behind every number is a family deciding whether to stay, flee, serve, grieve, forgive, or begin again. And why does this matter to us? Next slide, please. Building from that human reality, the question becomes, why does this matter beyond Ukraine? And why does it matter to us in this shared time together today? First, this war is redefining conflict as an assault on daily life, faith, dignity, and belonging. The violence reaches far beyond the battlefield into communities, hospitals, homes, schools, churches, families, and the quiet bonds that help people hold faith there is still a future together. Second, it's reshaping the world we live in. From food prices and energy security to global alliances, Ukraine's struggle is directly shaping the stability, safety, and moral direction of our shared future. Third, it shows that the trusted local leaders do not sit on the sidelines. They are the backbone of resilience. For instance, faith leaders across Ukraine are serving as first responders, holding communities together under immense pressure when institutions are strained and families are grieving. And finally, Ukraine is both a warning and an opportunity. In an era of rising division, including here in the United States, it shows how quickly cohesion can be tested and how essential it is to invest in the people and relationships that keep communities connected. Faith leaders are proving central to that. So Ukraine matters, not only because of what is happening there, but because it reveals what every society needs in order to withstand violence, resist fragmentation, and begin again. Next slide, please. So the question becomes, what does it look like to support a society not just to strive, but to hold together, recover, and thrive? ICRD's approach is to invest in people who are already holding communities together. We are supporting the formation of a network that brings together trusted faith actors in support of first responders and community leaders across the Ukraine. These are the individuals on the front lines of care, helping community navigate trauma, sustain trust, and prevent further fracture. This network is working to provide integrated support at the community level, connecting humanitarian response with spiritual care, moral leadership, and social cohesion across the country. It is working to ensure that people are supported not only physically, but in their faith, dignity, identity, and sense of well-being. This effort extends beyond Ukraine's borders because most conflicts ripple beyond borders. At the same time, we are connecting and building their lived experiences into pathways of peace, ensuring that what they are seeing and doing on the ground informs the national to international peace efforts. Their voices and experience are vital to shaping any future peace agreement, as well as implementing it in communities where peace must become real and sustainable. We're also linking them to other global networks of frontline faith leaders, enabling the exchange of practical learning, shared experience, and moral support across conflict settings. Because sustainable peace is not built only through formal negotiations. It is built through the people who hold communities together during conflict itself. ICRD's role is to connect the front lines of resilience with the pathways to peace, ensuring that Ukraine's recovery is grounded in the strength and experience of its people, and faith leaders are often the first to lead. And so our statement to you is how you can help support this work. You can share ideas that strengthen the network and expand its reach, open doors to faith, diaspora, humanitarian, and peacebuilding partners, and help resource this work through donations that support frontline leaders and communities. So together we can connect Ukraine's frontline of resilience to pathways for peace. So now, thank you for your time, and I'll hand over to Frank.
Okay, I can do it. I couldn't possibly summarize our work any better than that. The extent of it, when you have dozens and dozens of programs in dozens of countries over multiple decades, that has earned us a position of trust to go beyond what we were able to do in 30 minutes. I don't know how that would have been possible, but I do want to bring a couple of things into view as we close this out. I think most of you are aware of the challenges that organizations have faced from the abrupt funding changes that took place with the U.S. Department of State and USAID. Some of our resources came from the Department of State in some cooperative efforts, and those abruptness were met with challenges at our end, where we have worked hard to raise money separately to be able to continue those kinds of programs. So part of what we're talking about here today is simply to make it clear to you that we like the idea of this being in the hands of private donors and private foundations who are able to allow us to do the work that we do without conforming to another organization's priorities. We are clearly focused on the things that where we can have the greatest impact. And most importantly, because we are trusted by all the places where we work and where our relationships have been building, and we are trustworthy of our donors that that work actually happens and changes the lives of people. Anytime you hear from an organization about what they accomplish, even in the most stressful situations, even that work can't begin until our work is done. So we are the front line of the front line in that regard, and this is why we need help. One of the greatest treasured moments in my 15 years with ICRD was actually a board meeting where three prayers were offered. A Jewish prayer, a Muslim prayer, and a Christian prayer. And in that unity of voice, and was the simple understanding that we come to you as we do to God in humility and hope, with a desire to rely on strength that's beyond our own for the purpose of providing relief and safety. The reason we have trust is because we create a safe environment for people to trust us in the work that we do, and that work requires your support. So we are grateful for any consideration that you could provide us, and we will be, as we have been, sending out information as to how you can do that online or through us. But most importantly, we want to thank you for your time today. We did record this, so we knew that the wider audience would be those that click on the link later when we put this out for everyone to see. Thank you so much for your time and your support. And Rod, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. And gosh, thank you to all our participants and especially my colleagues who I'm so proud of. That was a lot of information in a short space of time. And so any of you are welcome to stay and pose questions to any of us. We're happy to elaborate on anything that we've covered.